I am very excited to be here today and be part of this wonderful event. Looking forward also, I've heard a bit about some of the agenda. I know some of the panelists on some of the later sessions. I know you will make the most of a very robust schedule, and I can't wait to hear about some of the things that you all talk about and decide and discuss coming out of that. I wanted to do 2 minutes, a little bit on my history, just building on what was already said. So I have been with the Department of Homeland Security since it was created. I am on soon to be my 9th job in that space. What that has meant has been a wealth of experience, a wealth of exposure to a number of different arenas, looking at screening of people, screening of stuff. How do we protect our environment, our critical infrastructure, all the things that are so critically important to us. So, out of all of that, I wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about, from a TSA perspective, some of the things that we see in our environment, some of the places we're looking at, what does the threat environment look like, and kind of what I see as important for here, where we go from here. So just as a start, I think although you are a more knowledgeable audience than many, the first thing most people think about when they hear TSA is airport checkpoint, right? The guys in the blue shirts. But we do a lot more than the guys in the blue shirts. They are critically important, and the reason people think about that is the most visible piece. That is the part that most Americans interact with, because that is, in fact, the part that we are operating on a day-to-day basis. And in many ways, that is quite often, for many Americans, the only federal person they will ever meet in their regular day-to-day lives, right? But in addition to that, we have a large responsibility for protecting and securing our nation's transportation infrastructure. So just as an example of other areas, every day we have federal air marshals serving as our last line of defense on board planes, making sure that if all of the other layers of security are not in place, if something happens, that they can be there to protect that airplane. We have intelligence and vetting operations that every day screen all of the passengers, all of the workers in the airports, across a wide variety of sectors to look for individuals who may be trying to do us harm. In the surface arena, we have responsibilities as well. How many of you knew that we did surface as well? I'd like to see more hands. Okay. But in the surface arena, and this goes back to how people think about us, right? So they see us operating in the airport. We also regulate and inspect in the airport. This is even more pronounced when you look at surface transportation. So we have responsibilities with respect to local transit providers. A great friend of ours is the folks who run Metro. We have incredible responsibilities with over-the-road trucking and over-the-road buses. We do pipelines. So all of these are kind of a different angle and avenue. This is sharing what threat information exists, helping put plans in place, helping exercise those plans, looking for what's the next investment that fits each of those communities and needs. So I wanted to put that in place as a starting point, then talk briefly about the threat environment that we're in. So once upon a time, what did the threat environment look like? So 9/11, the threat environment very much looked as, I have individual operatives who are hand-selected, trained over a period of time with the aim and goal of a very big event. Taking down the plane in a very spectacular way was the goal. Our environment now has completely shifted. It's not that they don't still want to do that. It's not that they don't still care about doing that. And they're trying some very innovative and creative ways to be able to do that. But at the same time, what we are now seeing is radicalize in place works just as well. Someone not trying to get into the plane, someone who just wants to go into the unsecured, the public area of the airport for a mass casualty attack would be just as much a win. That fundamentally changes how we think about what security looks like in this environment. When we have talked about securing transportation for the entire length of time I have been around the department, we've talked about it as a community approach. Everybody needs to be all in. That is never more true than it is today. In this environment, We need things that the government does. We need things private industry does. We need things that the community can do as well. So just an example for things that what do we care about in the government side of the house, I need a couple different types of capabilities. So first are, and these are areas that are well known for many of you, I need a way to rapidly share intelligence information with those who need it. So for example, we have an aviation domain information sharing, intelligence sharing process. We have just formally announced earlier this week a surface transportation advisory committee that will help us stand up even more robust mechanisms to share with the surface arena. I need ability to do rapid screening of millions of people every day. And I have to do kind of different types of screening, depending on what my authority is, who they are they flying, are they the mechanic on the plane, are they, what is their role and responsibility? I need the ability not only to look for known bad guys, not only the ones that intelligence tells us, Tom Smith, I also need to find the unknowns, those who are attempting to subvert our process. So if you look at, for example, what happened after 12/25, the flight over Detroit, where an individual tried to set himself on fire and then an explosion on the plane, he was not well known to intelligence. The radicalization process happened so fast, he hadn't yet met criteria to be nominated. But did we have bits and pieces of information? Yes. Did we have a pattern? Did we know someone was trying to do something like that? Yes. So after that, we have established a whole set of processes and rules to look for the not known, but these other indicators. For those of you who don't live in this world but know that every time your credit card company calls you because suddenly there was an anomalous transaction, that's the kind of thing we're looking at, the anomalous activity that fits up what we have seen in intelligence information as an expected mode. What other things do we need? We need to understand the different threat vectors. So once upon a time, we all remember, and you still see them a lot, not only in our airports, but in other places, metal detectors. It was all about the knife. It was all about the gun. We've expanded well beyond that now. We not only have explosives in where they are working on lower and lower weights on any kind of time basis. We have poisons, we have gases, we have powders. We have other areas of interest. They look at both passenger, cargo. They look at just get that gun and go take out an open public area. Wide variety and different range. And all of these need different types of solutions to be able to intervene. The last thing I really want to highlight is that point of insider threat. This is another area where once upon a time, right, the goal and aim was I'm going to try to get a visa, I'm going to try to come through a lawful process. The logical extension to that is I need to figure out how to look like or actually be someone who has full access. How do I get into that arena? How do I be a cleared person who is right there able to take these actions? So I need processes that help me look at, again, what's normal behavior, what's anomalous behavior. How do I take action with someone who has that kind of insider, that is supposed to be that trusted person, and help ensure that they recognize the responsibilities that go with that kind of access? And therefore look for ensuring that they are reporting if they see someone doing something that is outside of the norm or that is against policy, so that we don't have introduction of these incidents. Why do I keep emphasizing this? Because we've known for years that that happens in an arena related to crime, right? Things are moved through our transportation system every single day for criminal organizations. How many of us think that somebody might not look too carefully if someone's paying them to move something else other than something for a criminal entity, right? This is the problem set, this is the mindset, this is what we're going after. So back to my point on whole of community approach. So the bad news about getting to this level of government in this long a time in this arena is I rarely get to work on easy problems. I pretty much only work on hard problems of long-standing, long-sticking, otherwise known as, if it were simple, somebody else would have fixed it a long time ago. So my perspective and mindset is, how do you set up the right community approach to take on these long-standing, hard issues? This isn't just having one smart person in a room who's going to come up with a brilliant idea. Much as I'd love to see that, that doesn't happen most of the time. Most of the time, it's about bringing together that right group. Once you say, I've got that right group, how do I create that trusted environment? So I have to have the right skill sets, the right background, the right knowledge, but then I have to create trust, that people all feel like we're all trying to go for the same end goal. We have the same interests in reaching that end goal. We're all committed to it, and we trust and are committed to each other in reaching that goal. That's not the easiest thing in the world. My running joke about this is I really, someday when I leave government and have more time to devote to scholarly pursuits, I want to go back and really work on game theory. Because game theory is all about how do you get diverse communities to try to line up towards common problems. And if any of you have looked at it, the more people you have involved, the harder it is to get that alignment of interests. But that's when you see things work. I have seen people solve really, really hard stuff when you get those alignments right. So why am I saying that? Because I want to help encourage a conversation around a couple different things. One is understanding what those communities are. All of us who spent any time in and around technology are so excited about all the options technology has to provide, but we are forgetting the human element that goes with making the technology work. That you can't just have 1,000 flowers blooming. You can't have every community pick something and try it on their own. It doesn't pull together in the right way. You need to figure out the right structure that lets you solve hard stuff. You have people committed and into it for the long term, but you're still agile and able to move. And that is hard. That's very hard. So, some other pieces that go along with it. Understanding markets. Understanding who are the right players that go together. So for example, looking in surface transportation. So if I'm focusing on identifying security solutions in the surface transportation arena, do y'all think that the folks who do pipelines and the folks who do the metro have the same interests? There are some overlapping solutions, but their interests are not the same. Right? They have some of the same needs. They have very different funding streams, very different oversight, very different types of rules they have to comply with. So their interests don't quite match. And we need to think about what are the groups that have the like types of mentality, modality, interest points. Continuing on this line, and I made this joke earlier, been around this community and in and around technology for quite some time. Quite often, people come to me and say things like, right, I can totally solve that problem for you through machine learning or blockchain or whatever the buzz item of the day. But the first thing they say to me is, so first, all we need to do is get all of your data in one database. I think I'll be dead before that happens. I get what they're saying. I can control, I can guarantee an outcome if you give me that kind of structured environment. But that's not the world we live in. And back to our point of federated community, we need to have a good understanding where that piece of AI or that rule set or whatever it is can run in a way where it runs in each of the appropriate repositories, but still have the results make sense, a comprehensive way, that the agreements about information sharing pull together across. In this arena, we have several different hard places when it comes time to talk with the market. So the first in this area that we frequently run into is, how do we create the right fora that will allow us to have that right type of ongoing information sharing? I talked a little bit about sharing of threat information, but we also need to have a way to talk about ongoing requirements. And when I say requirements, it sounds very IT, right? The whole, like, just give me your list of requirements and I'll come up with a solution. But what I really mean is, what's my problem statement? And how do I create the problem statement that solves multiple issues for multiple entities at the same time? So the discussion earlier today, one of the things I'm so excited about that we've gotten to do was how far we've gotten in our computed tomography acquisition. A year ago, this was a great idea, didn't have a funding stream associated with it particularly, and didn't even have a program of record. And in 1 year, we went from that to a full acquisition. This is not normal government work, right? Normal government work is I've developed my requirements, then I go to the Hill, and I request money for 2 years out because I'm building my budget right now for 21. They decide if they're going to give it to me. The year I finally get it is when I put my acquisition program together, and then it still takes another 18 months to 2 years to award, right? That's 4 to 5 years out after identifying my problem. That doesn't work in this arena. That doesn't give us the responsive, reactive environment we need to address the threats we are seeing. The second piece I'm running into that is critically important is how do we create the right entry points into each of our organizations and with the right communities. So, and in particular, I would add, particularly for non-traditional partners and for small business. What we often see is a number of entities who are committed to us, know how to work with us, working on solving our problems day in and day out. But we need that innovation of someone who is working on a completely different problem, but that suddenly we realize there's a crossover that works with us. And we need to promote and encourage that in a new way. With that, and part of the reason I've spent so much time kind of talking through that upfront piece is getting to that point of, I've heard from a number of entities that they often view the government as kind of a black box, and especially in the Homeland Security space, that they find it hard to figure out which problems we are trying to solve and when. So I'm hoping that through some of this, I've gotten you to say, oh, that's what she cares about. That's what TSA is working on. That's what DHS is working on. In this, as you might expect, especially for us, public-private partnerships play a huge and critical role. So remember back to when I started, and I said we own and operate the checkpoint, but then we also have responsibility for regulating and inspecting the airport arena, surface, and cargo. Guess how much of the equipment, the procedures, the people we buy for anything other than checkpoint? Very little, right? Therefore, absolutely critically important, just as day one, for us to be working lockstep with those operators and then trusted other entities who can help be that solution set, that we can pull those communities together to go into the way to solve the problems we are seeing. Our TSA Modernization Act, it recently highlighted the importance of both the public-private partnership arena generally, but also in particular with respect to authorizing our innovation task force and creating specific requirements around small businesses. This is fantastic legislation for us and is really going to very much help us as we try to tackle these issues. And we're hoping to see a lot of new entrants in this arena as we are trying to solve a wide variety of problems across a large number of market spaces. When I say markets, I've given you a couple examples: pipelines, cargo, surface, international. Our international friends are struggling with the exact same problems that we are. But today, each of these look like independent, separate markets, right? If you're building something, do you think about how that machine solves both US problems and pick your favorite country in the Asia-Pacific Rim? Right. But in this arena, some of the areas in public-private partnership, we recently had a broad agency announcement, which resulted in some really great applications around alarm resolution, identity verification, emerging threat detection, automated security design, passenger communication, passenger load distribution, and passenger wait times. So we're getting some good ideas. I would like to see the next time we do this, we have some really great surface and cargo items as well. Some of these would apply, but I'd like to see more. As part of this, we also are trying to figure out ways to reduce barriers to entry, to make it easier to have those back and forth in communications. What we quite often hear from the surface community is, we don't need you to buy stuff. We need you to help us create that market so that the price isn't up here, because pick your favorite surface transportation would, and they don't have a lot of free extra budget, right? So not only can I figure out who the community is that has the cash, but also I can figure out how best to cycle what and when. As part of this, we have created a Chief Innovation Officer who's going to be focusing on a lot of these issues. All right, so I covered a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. I didn't highlight, but also other items that we've recently worked on was creating a biometrics roadmap, because we wanted to make sure we were signaling not just the pilots that we are doing today in conjunction with CBP, but what we want and where we're going. We've issued a cybersecurity roadmap, which again, similarly, is trying to say, this is the stage, this is the outcome, this is the environment we are trying to work in and achieve. I hope as we go into the last remaining 5 minutes, you all will pepper me with really hard questions that I will have fun answering. But all that's to say, this is a great time in many ways to be in this community. The level of excitement, innovation, new funding streams are where I haven't seen them in years. The fact that passenger growth in aviation is up 5% year over year for the last several years with no end in sight. The fact that cargo is up to 2.5% and 3% year over year across the system and only growing suddenly gives us new opportunities and new partners to work with. So many things coming, so many options, so many opportunities, and I can't wait to see what we do next. All this is to say, back to my original point, it's a community that's all striving together to reach common goals. So thank you, and hope you all join us in committing to not on our watch. Thank you. Sir.
Rotating Clear Avenue, are you working towards moving some of the checkpoints OCONUS more and more?
So, excellent question. How many of you know about CBP's pre-clearance program? Yes. So CBP has set up a great process and program where they are able to establish a full pre-clearance environment in an overseas location prior to coming to the US. Traditionally, TSA still retained much more of a oversight regulatory role in those spaces. We are looking, as CBP goes forward, to say, how do we make sure we're stationing TSA personnel with that to take a much larger role? We want to make sure that we don't get into a situation where it's two different standards, two different perspectives. It defeats the whole purpose if you get off the plane here and then we have to rescreen you again, right? So what can we do to remedy and work on those processes? All that's to say, yes, that is a goal.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, David Winks with AccuSite. First of all, we're very grateful for the work that you're doing, and thank you for looking and anticipating the upcoming threats. As you think about the changes in electromagnetic weapons and how that could affect your mission, are you open to looking at how to protect systems against that?
Fantastic question. You are highlighting the emerging threat environment, of which there are many. I only covered some of them. Cyber and electromagnetic weapons, and there's unmanned aerial vehicles. We have a large variety of emerging interests that we can't truly understand all of the different vectors associated with and what we will need to do. Fantastic question. One that I know we have gotten into some very good conversations around what's the right type of protection mitigation measures. So first you have to detect it, right? Any of these. First I have to be able to detect it. Second thing is I need to understand enough of the intent to figure out the right type of mitigation strategy. I don't have to fully know intent, but I need to know, for example, is that UAS carrying something? Does it look like it's a joyrider? Does it look like it might try to hit something? I don't need to know all, I just have to have enough knowledge that I can pick a right mitigation activity. So, fantastic area, would love to hear more about that, yes. All the way in the back.
Hi, Norma Graham with Holland and Knight. And first, thank you. You have been laboring for many, many years trying to deal with these issues. So we will definitely give you another round of applause when we're done here. Very interested in the TSA Cybersecurity Roadmap. It's an incredibly important document. I do think, though, that within the modes of transportation, we're trying to figure out what does it mean, how is that going to roll out. So maybe if you have some ideas about that, that would be great to hear about. So thank you.
Fantastic. So cyber is one of the areas that I think we're just embarking on a fantastic conversation. To your exact point, there is both protection of systems, protection of data. So one of the ones we talk about not infrequently, think about just in the airport environment, right? If we're trying to set up a place where we could have curb to gate, it's going to go probably at some future point. I am making this up. This may not be what it ends up looking like, but just as an example. So you were at home. You checked in on your phone. As you show up at the airport, you get a message on your phone saying, I see you've arrived at the airport. Your appointment for screening is at 2:32. Right? None of that's owned by government, right? But they had to communicate back and forth between a private entity database and the government database to get that done. As you walk up, another set of collection, maybe say your facial image. So you don't have to show an ID or a boarding pass. Another transaction in an open environment. But that has to come to us. We verify it's you. We say this is your screening strategy, your screening criteria, so therefore you're going to get this type of screening, right? And then you go through, and you then want to go to Starbucks. You get the idea. Lots of back and forth in a constrained environment, a community controlled by geography. Next slide. We look at environments such as rail or pipeline. Any of you who have very closely watched the discussions around cybersecurity and the Internet of Things or industrial control systems know that up until pretty recently, the mindset kind of was, well, if it's not attached to the internet or just starting to be attached to the internet, it's not really at risk. We all know that's not true anymore, right? We see our adversaries, both state and non-state actors, wanting right now already to have some kind of persistent presence in these environments. This is a new way. Right now we're doing a huge amount of work with our partners at CISA to try to make sure we're getting out all of the right types of basic protection materials, but we need to get more sophisticated in kind of what is the next stage and next event. So fantastic question, an area I look forward for us working on. I think this is going to be quite important for us for the next 5 to 10 years in particular, as we really get moving. Yes. Next. And then I'm about to run out. All right. Very good. Well, thank you so much. Oh, sorry, yes.
Thank you, Amar Al-Sawi from Novus. So you have, thank you for being with us. You have a ton of humans doing lots of monitoring. And at scale, that problem gets to be harder and harder, especially as the number of transactions goes up, the number of crossings goes up, and so forth. What are your views on the role of AI and machine learning in that monitoring environment?
Oh, excellent question. So one of the areas I think we're most interested in AI in the near term is actually if you look at things like the X-ray images that our folks look at every single solitary day. One of the items that's particularly part of the acquisition that we are embarking on is how to get the machines trained up on what it's looking like. So that doesn't just mean a shape of a gun, well that's good, or looking at the type of material in what might be an explosive, but it might mean the pieces and parts of that, how to identify what's within that. This is an area in particular I think we're near term really excited and interested to see what AI can help us do. Longer term, we've done a lot of work to try to figure out which parts of people screening could have more automation. There's a couple areas in particular around looking at social media. That has been slow. What we have seen is it can help us cool down a bit, but then there's still a lot you have to look through because we're not yet there where you could really distinguish, nope, this is someone just linking to something stupid. This is something that's very concerning. Because imagery is much more difficult on matching, that kind of stuff, right? So the same issues in some ways that you see some of the internet providers competing with and concerned with as they look at how do I pull down extremist content would apply, for example, in our space. First Amendment protected speech, somebody trying to recruit for ISIS could be using the same picture on their site, right? So how do we make sure we're distinguishing effectively and appropriately? And right now, a human is still better at that by a pretty good margin. But there's other areas, absolutely, we see a great takeoff for AI. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate having been here. I can't wait to hear all the great conversations that you will have the rest of the day. I know you have a fantastic set of panels. Thank you again.